Hello, folks. Welcome again to the Reason RX podcast with your co-host
Melanie in Minnesota.
and your other co-host Michael in doesn't start with the M. Michael in my house in Texas. So today we have back graciously, we didn't scare her off from last time, make her totally hate us, the great Kim Cabrera. She was with us in episode 5 a few months ago discussing tracking. And so she discussed her background, how she got interested in tracking, what tracking is. As one example, looked at a dog track versus a cat track. Talked about how a lot of people mistake like dog tracks for mountain lion tracks and get unnecessarily scared or paranoid about their environment or nature. And talked about what parents can do to help kids get more involved in nature and more confident with it. Talked about some science and logic of tracking and how some people think tracking could be the source of science. Talked about Montessori education and tracking a little bit, and what you can do and how you can track different places and how it helps you stay healthy. So, it's in episode 5. You can go back and listen to that. Really good episode. And that was like about an hour and a half long, but listen in pieces if you want. But so Kim's gracious enough to come back, so we'll be talking to her again today. And I want to say, quickly, if you like the podcast and the episodes, then please share with friends, share with family, and share with parents so they can help their children, develop better, learn more, learn better. Share it with teachers and school administrators. A lot of these ideas will help us have a better educational system and have children who can be more confident, more competent in the world, more aware of it and what they can do and how it works. We need, unfortunately, because of some bad ideas in the culture, some things are great, but some of the conveniences and stuff have gotten us too isolated from nature, too kind of soft, too divorced from our food and our environment and what's going on. And because, since we're social animals, we got that fission fusion thing going on and we're social. So that social aspect of us is very important and we're stressing that a lot. And that's fine, but we got to make sure we stay connected to the real world, make sure we're holistic and look at what the whole of what it is to be a human being and not just get carried away with being inside, playing video games and playing Minecraft and ordering pizza every night and never going anywhere. We need to get out and dig our fingers in the soil and talk to farmers and buy from the farmers market and get outside and pick up trash and look at squirrels and study them and things like that. But
And get some sun.
yeah, right. Because
you need vitamin D, you need the nutrients, Plus,
yeah.
it just makes you feel good.
Yeah.
You feel alive. You're
Yeah.
part of your nature, your environment.
Yeah. That's probably one place, there'd be some evidence that we needed vitamin D. First, we think about how we feel good in the sun or how we're healthier when we're in the sun. Then you got to be scientific, and you go, well, why? What's going on? And then, and people could know that thousands of years ago, and they did. They leave their babies outside when the babies were sick. They knew the babies needed sun, fresh air. They didn't know exactly why. They just knew it worked. And so, modern science is starting to figure out the why of things that have been done for thousands and millions of years. Reality comes first, science comes second. And any conflict between reality and science, who wins? Reality. Because then it's pseudoscience, it's not real science. But
check your policies.
Yeah, amen. But so spread this, because a lot of this stuff, will help improve and inform biology education and make it better. A lot of people don't know much about squirrels or birds or animals or anything in their area. We should be more familiar with that, as like every animal on Earth is, and people have been for almost all their history except for the last 40 years or so. So, spread it. And we got, since last time we talked with Kim, we've gotten something going on PayPal and Patreon, so you can donate, contribute to the show, help us, if you want better sound equipment, better recording stuff. We could use the money to market or spread the show more. It'd be appreciated. But cool. Any other intro words, Melanie?
No, it's good.
Cool. So we want to talk to Kim, and as we say, as we talked about in the stuff we've talked about so far, tracking is important for a variety of reasons. It gets us outside. It gets our children outside. It gets us in nature in a complex, fractal environment. It's great being indoors. Like sleeping when it's 68 in Houston is a lot easier than it would be to sleep when it's 90 at night, and then having some protection from the mosquitoes temporarily. But everything inside is flat, simple, human made, all this temperature controlled stuff. Much more complex and interesting, and our brains get more turned on and more alive outside. And, as I say, science even hasn't discovered all the benefits of nature yet. Just the vitamin D, no telling what else is made by the sun. There's the vitamin D and other factors that come about. You get the energy from the sun. So some people think, it is energy, you can't deny it, and we get energy from food and materials to grow, not just energy, it's not just calories. But if we're outside, we're getting more heat, more energy, and so some people think if you're outside more, you don't got to eat as much. It makes sense, if you know the physics, because the light gets into your skin. It actually some light can actually penetrate your skull. Not very much, a certain percentage, but I think some radiation can actually make it to your brain. And people can look that up. And then I got that somewhere. I'll maybe put a link in the show notes to some stuff I think I have on my blog about that. But so there's benefits there. The bacteria outside, there's certain bacteria that have been proven to make us happier, and they're not indoors. And people are finding out more and more about the gut biome and all that, how the bacteria is important. But so it'd make for healthier kids, and when some children grow up on farms and so there's the germs and stuff they come into contact with, and the movement they get. So it's showing that they have better, in certain areas, some motor control things than kids who grew up indoors and in a city. And then they have access to the different animals and the bacteria and stuff that helps their immune system grow and respond and adapt. Whereas in the cities, it's confused, it doesn't know what to do. Because we're evolutionary adaptive animals. You take away the environment we've evolved to grow in. We got to have that interaction and those responses. Well, if it's not there, it doesn't happen. So it's important. And then, as we talked about, we learn about a lot of things that's done in a Montessori classroom. You learn about sights, touches, textures, shapes. Kids are just soaking up the information, especially when they're younger. Like Maria Montessori called it the absorbent mind. Actually had a book like that. So the kids will get out. It's a much more complex environment. They're moving, they're learning, they're observing. As we talked about, some of this stuff is a basis of science, some people think. We can link to that book again. But just this tracking stuff has so many benefits and is so important in many ways. And it's important in our history. I don't think we'd be here if it wasn't for tracking. And it's fun. Nowadays you don't got to track to hunt. You can just track to, as we talked about last time, take some pictures. Or no, we talked about that with Dr. Bern Heinrich. Yeah. How you don't got to do that, hunt, but take an iPhone and track and like kill it, so to speak, with your cell phone. Take a picture.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So there's a lot we can learn here, and teachers, as I say, can help, can get stuff for biology, things they can start to change education with to have a better biology education, get the kids more outdoors and interested. As Baron Heinrich said, it's like no one cares about DNA. No one gets excited about a chemical. You get excited about an animal. Give me a dog. Let me watch a raccoon or a bird. Like DNA or like glyphosate or something. Woohoo!
Yeah.
I mean, they're important and stuff, but it's like, you care about the animals and stuff and the plants. So that's what's going to like capture the kids, get their interest going and make them want to learn.
Yeah.
So we need to do more of that, in the schools and homes and homeschools. And so that's kind of the general idea we got here, as we talked about. It was talked about all the time, education's holistic. So as J.J. Gibson said in his idea about ecological perception doesn't occur in a vacuum. It's not a two-dimensional thing. Perception happens by moving through the environment. So perception cannot happen without movement. So we don't want to sit still too much. We want to move through the environment, and that's when we can perceive. And if you notice that, what do animals, a lot of them do? If you're standing still, what do? They create the motion by moving their heads. Right? But, so, a lot of reasons there why tracking is important. So, are you still awake, Kim?
I am, yes.
Okay, good. So, yeah, so...
I'm enjoying the talk on tracking.
Sweet. Thanks, good. Good. But, so let's, like, bring in Kim. I just wanted to make sure we got some ideas about, why this is important for the education context. But so Kim was on before, and we got, we can refer to episode 5 for a longer bio and all that. But could you give for like some folks that are new, could you give a brief, brief background of you?
Brief bio. Okay, well, I'm Kim Cabrera, and I'm a tracker. I started learning tracking when I was young from my dad, but got really into it starting around 7th grade, and attended a tracking school for a week-long session and got further obsessed with it. And all these years later, I've found the Cyber Tracker program and have dived into that with both feet, and have now got cyber track and science specialist in the forest environment and in the desert environment.
Cool.
So 2 different bioregions. And so I'm hoping to continue with that and hosting some evaluations and just continue to share and help educate people about tracking and why it's important and how we can all use it. So that's a little bit about me.
Good. And, well, as I say, people can, like, refer to episode 5 for more, and I'll put some links in this podcast, and I got more links in the show notes from last time. But, and we discussed, and there's some notes, and we discussed, like, more Kim's background and what the Cyber Tracker thing is and all that. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it today. So... could you give a brief description of what tracking is? What the heck is tracking? What does that mean?
What is tracking? Okay, well, most people, when they think of tracking, they picture footprints, and you're following footprints, and that's all it's about. But it's really not all about just that. It's about a lot of things. It's a really all-encompassing naturalist skill. I've also had one time somebody at a college thought that tracking meant like bounty hunting, which is kind of an odd thing. I'd never had thought that it would be associated with that, but apparently, there's an association with that as well, but that's more a loose association. Mostly what I deal with is wildlife tracking, and so Yeah, apparently, I mean, way back in the Old West days, I'm sure it could have been used for bounty hunting and stuff. But nowadays, that's not gonna be as useful. But tracking is an all-encompassing skill, sort of, that brings in naturalist knowledge from pretty much all the disciplines of natural history. So, in the cyber tracker, one of the things that they tell you with the evaluations is that they can ask you anything out there. So they could ask you, if they find a bone, they could ask you whose bone is it, or what part of the body was it from, or was it from the right or left side, or they could ask a skull or a feather or a nest or a gall on a plant or a leaf miner on a leaf.
Cool.
Things like that. So a lot of it, tracking is more than just footprints. It's all the naturalist skills, and it brings in all of your knowledge. So, you can get a tracking book and you can study that. And that's fine if you want to just learn to recognize footprints. But animals make so many other signs. They make scrapes and burrows and nests and scent marks, and they leave their fur on things, and all these different behaviors that animals have out in the woods can be recognized through the tracks and sign that they leave. So, when an animal is stirring up the duff layer in the forest and kicking up the duff looking for food, that's a sign that animal was there. And if you have enough of the background knowledge and you've done your homework and learned the biology of the different animals around you, you can pretty well narrow it down to which animals might be foraging there and what they might be hunting for. So tracking itself is all about observing nature around you, and also encompassing your knowledge of the animals, everything from insects to mammals to humans that are around you, and what types of signs they can leave on the landscape going about their daily lives, just doing the things that they normally do. Like, they hunt, they feed on prey, they scent mark, they communicate with each other using their scats, they rub on trees, all kinds of things animals do. They gather nesting material. All of these things that they do can be recognized through tracks and signs. So tracking is a skill that uses a lot of parts of your brain, because you're physically observing things, and you're also interpreting what you're observing, and you're kind of accessing the little file cabinet in your brain that has the knowledge of, what does a black bear do on a tree, or what animal could have left this feather. And so you're always accessing these little file cabinets in your brain to figure out, what this is, or if that's a little hole in your knowledge that's missing, and you need to go look it up and try to learn to recognize what that is. So that's kind of an overview of what tracking is about.
That's a good one.
More than just footprints. Yeah, it goes beyond just footprints.
Yeah.
Right.
And then while we're there, one thing to do, I wanted to discuss with people. So it might seem like, whoa, crap, all this stuff we got to do. I can't do tracking. It blows my mind. But, whoa, okay, let's stop and analyze this. Just like good systems of education do. If you look at how Montessori, if you look at how Montessori teaches, and you learn the principles there, you can apply them to other areas. Or if you look at MoveNat, like a system of movement, how do they teach things, and how can I get that and apply that logic to other areas? Same thing here. So you're not going to start it with it all. So we can break it down to little skills. No, you don't start with it all. No.
And start with the footprints. Start with the fun stuff. Try to learn to recognize the footprints first, because that's the fun. The fun thing that attracts most folks to tracking is everybody sees tracks. You go to the beach, you go walk on a trail, you see tracks everywhere, and I think there's this feeling that, if you don't know what it is, then you're not a good tracker. But that's not true, because nobody's born a tracker. You have to learn it, and you have to put in the dirt time and and spend time actually learning what those are. So, don't feel bad about it. Just go research it and look it up, and that's the fun thing, is learning all the details of these tracks. You can tell what animal it was, and if it was, maybe it was a mom deer that had a baby with it, and you can tell that because you find the little tiny baby tracks next to the mom track.
Cool.
Yeah. Fun stuff like that, and just take it in chunks. Don't look at it as overall this big, huge thing that is going to take gazillions of years to learn, because it doesn't. It's you can learn it. Just start with the basics and work up from there. Look at the tracks around you, and in your neighborhood or at a neighborhood park or a trail somewhere near you, and just start with that, and then build from there. So just begin to identify what you can find easily, and then just reach out beyond that to try to find other tracks.
Yeah, it's a good idea. And then just look at one single track in isolation. Just try to get interested in it, learn the shapes. And it might depend on your brain. I think I talked about this last time, how because I don't have much experience or background in art or some things like that.
Shape and pattern and shape.
Yeah, my brain, it took a while for my brain to get used to that, my mind and my brain. Like the shapes of leaves and the colors, and then the shapes of tracks. Yeah. And so I know it can happen. So be patient with yourself.
Oh, totally, yeah. Because you're not going to get it right away. I mean, it takes a long time, and some of the differences are pretty subtle. If you think about mountain lion versus dog, that the differences can be subtle if you've never really seen a lot of either one of those tracks. The differences between them are relatively subtle, and it takes a while looking at them side by side to really be able to differentiate the differences in those tracks. And so it's just a lot of it is experience, but also just repetition, going out and finding different tracks, because no two tracks are ever going to look alike. There's too many variables. And you hit the ground on the side of your foot versus flat on your foot, or the ground is uneven, or there's a rock or a stick that you step on. So you never make the same tracks twice. And the animals, it's the same thing. So they're walking on uneven terrain all the time, and their tracks, they slip, they slide, they trip and fall. I mean, their tracks never look perfect. Like, you see those ones in the field guides, and if you're looking for the ones in the field guides, you're rarely going to find those. Because the ones in the field guides are the perfect tracks, with all the details so that you can see those details. But most tracks are not going to have all those perfect details for you.
Yeah, like mud, sand, clay, ground texture, how dry it is, if it's rained, leaves or no leaves, pine needles versus oak leaves versus American elm leaves. A lot of stuff. Slope.
Yeah, every substrate you can think of, whether it's wet or dry, whether there's debris on it, all that stuff comes into play.
Male and or female?
Yeah, male or female, because some animals, the males are larger than the females, and some animals it's the other way around. So they call that sexual dimorphism. There's two forms, dimorphism. So one is larger than the other. And so that you can see in the tracks also, and that takes experience and time, and looking at the tracks in detail, and looking at the size of them relative to other tracks of that same species.
And then age.
It's a lifelong learning experience.
That's a great thing, because you start out
tracking
with
you're never going to run out of stuff to learn with tracking. I mean, I've never run out of things to learn with tracking. There's always something new.
And even this, even this putz right here, I can still bring things up on the Animals Don't Cover Their Tracks Facebook page. And even I can get these experts to disagree. And I'm saying, what is this? I don't know. Can you tell me what this track is? Because I'm trying to learn and I want to know. I'm interested. And then they're saying, oh, this is one thing. And oh, it's something else. And eventually they discuss all these different features and decide on what it is. And pretty much all of them agree.
Right.
But so, So you can still do it too. But start Sorry.
That's a good example. Yeah, any track that you want to try to get identified, you can post on the group there on Facebook. Animals Don't Cover Their Tracks, and there's 8,000 members, and we're a group of, there's expert trackers and there's newbie trackers. So there's the whole range of tracking skill levels on there, and so some folks will say one thing and somebody else will weigh in with something else, and eventually you'll have this big old long discussion. And it's just like what happens in the field, because when you're in the field with a bunch of trackers, that's exactly what happens. You just get into this big old long discussion, and I can't tell you how many times we've had the dog versus coyote discussion in the field.
Cool.
That one's a big one, dog versus coyote, or sometimes raccoon versus bobcat, and those discussions get long and sometimes heated. It's great when you're in the field with trackers, and that's the same thing that kind of happens in the online group, is you get those discussions going about tracks, and it's a learning experience, because some folks will have more experience with that particular species than others, and might be able to help out more with identifying it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Kind of cool.
And so start with the simple one track at a time. Then you can look at there's all kinds of different things. Learn one track. You learn a few animals in your area. Start to learn more. Male versus male and female, age, how much it might weigh, and then eventually, and go step by step. And then eventually, some people, I think, can start to tell sometimes when the animal stepped if it was looking one way or the other. Yeah, the pressure release thing.
And then start doing things like you want to learn the tracks, draw them, because that helps solidify those details in your brain. That's one thing that we did when I was training to do the search and rescue tracking, is they would start you out and you would draw the tracks of the person that you were following, because the act of drawing it sets those details in your brain, and you look at it so closely when you're drawing it and trying to duplicate those details on paper that you set those details in your brain. You're hardwiring it up there. I mean, there's one, you can sit there with a cell phone and take a photo of it, but that's way different than sitting there drawing the track. Because when you're just taking a photo, you look at it and that's it. You move on. But with drawing, you're paying attention to close details. And so the same thing applies to animal tracks. If you want to learn those tracks, it's best to try to draw them in the correct dimensions and with the claw marks, and try to draw the perfect tracks at first so you can learn the details, but then you can try to draw partial ones and ones that are not complete so you can learn what they look like. And a lot of folks carry a notebook in the field and they'll draw tracks that they find that are interesting. And they'll just do it in the field and draw them, or you can take a picture and draw it later when you get home. So that's one suggestion to help you learn those details and solidify them in your brain.
And it's an important one, because I've read and heard about some biologists who demanded their students do that because they knew it helped them get detail and get used to being very observant, because you can't draw unless you observe what's there.
Right, exactly.
So you got to start observing, well, there's this, and it's this shape, and this mark is here, and this indentation is there, and there's a bump here, and there's ridges here, and it's this long and this wide, and all this other stuff.
Yeah, and the proportions of the track, too.
Yeah.
So, the relative size of the palm pads versus the toe pads, and that can help in some identifications, like between the felines and the canines. That helps. And so you get those things, the details, and it also forces you to look for the small details. Like sometimes claw marks will show up just as little tiny pinpricks ahead of the toes, and they're hard to see. And so that's something that gets missed a lot because they're so small. But if you're sitting there drawing it, you might be paying enough attention that you'll see those, and they'll stand out to you better.
And that's another skill that takes time. Yeah, like as I've said with me, in my brain with the shapes of plants and leaves and tracks, it just takes practice. So don't get frustrated and give up. Just, stick with it, keep going at it, and you get better and better and more observant.
Yeah, I mean, like, I look at some of my early drawings, and I'm like, wow, that's terrible. And then, some of the other ones are better, but, you're never totally satisfied with your drawing. You always find something wrong with it, but it's not really about your artistic skill. It's about getting the details in your brain. It's not really so much whether you're a great artist, because I don't think very many of us are great artists.
Yeah, I'm not.
So I can draw just a track, just an outline of it, but I can't make it look perfectly like a track. That takes artistic skill that I don't have, but, it's not about your artistic skill. It's about helping you to recognize that track in the future.
So one thing really quickly, before we continue that, I want to make sure, parents, teachers, school administrators see, remember, these are some ideas right here. We can put it institute in the classroom, in biology, in Montessori schools, in preschools, at home with your kids. In another episode, I don't know if it'll be before or after this one, but we recorded it earlier today. We talked about observation skills, and I've talked about in the past. But this is something that could be used to help kids develop observation skills. And especially when they're younger, that's when they're going to start getting interested in this. And when they naturally love animals, as we talked about last time, I think it's partly in our nature to kind of track and to become the animal, because what the hell do little boys do?
Right.
It's not some weird thing. It's because so many do it, it must be have become part of our nature. I think recently it occurred to me that it seems like I'd have to really go through a lot of stuff to explain this, and I'm not going to right now, of course, but because of learning about some epigenetics and some evolution and some stuff, one thing I thought recently is how the body is really, what was I thinking about how to put it, a tool of adaptation or something like that. So I think we're really in it ingrains all these adaptations from before in all these different ways, whether it's genetic or epigenetic. And so maybe that's something that's just become kind of in us and in our nature, that tracking thing, because we did it so long. And it's so
all of our ancestors tracked, because if you go far enough back in ancient history, all of our ancestors had to hunt to live, had to hunt to find food, and so they had to track because they had to find the animals.
Yeah.
So it's part of our ancient background for every culture, pretty much. If you go back far enough.
Yeah, and it wouldn't just be something in isolation, we just track, because the way evolution is and the way things work, we adapt. So that would have had effects upon our gait, our eyes, the way we process, all this other stuff. Just like when some animals are domesticated, like when the dog is domesticated, it's not just they're domesticated and that's all. There's this whole, from what I've heard, a whole a suite of traits that come with it. So they become more kind of docile as opposed to wolves. The ears are floppy. The leg size changes. There's some other characteristics that go along with it. It's not just one thing in isolation. All this stuff kind of goes together. So, it's kind of how the adaptation works. And I think there'd be some, because of the tracking, for so many thousands of years, it would have a deep effect on our biology naturally. I mean, that's just evolution and adaptation, But, so to kind of get back to the kids and the teachers, if we're talking about having this done when the kids are young, when they naturally have more interest, and then I brought up, the fact that a lot of boys pretend they're animals, just natural, but they're more interested in them. They love nature, and you go to the zoo and they're just whoa, this new animal, and they just open-eyed and they don't say anything, and they look at you and they look at the animal and they look at you and they look at the animal. It's so beautiful. But while they have this interest, start teaching them about some of the tracks and having them memorize them, and then they can start learning more. Or when they're in art class, one thing they can do is they can draw, but have them draw some tracks. How well can you draw this track is an assignment. So there's interdisciplinary connections. It's not just, there's art and there's biology. Well, they're connected,
And you can add math, too. You could do tracking math because you can put measurement in there.
Mm-hmm.
So measuring the tracks, measuring the strides and gaits.
Yeah.
You could do, counting the number of toes for the very basic math for the young kids. You could start them out with
true, right.
Dogs have toes, and, bears have 5 toes, and do the basic math, and 2 bears have 40 toes. You could start with that kind of thing.
And they love it. You can just see them going home. Mom, frogs have 5 toes. Dogs have 4 toes. 4, like this.
I was thinking, Kim, that what a great family outing, too. Parents can just plug their kids in front of a TV or, whatever else they do. But to get in touch with nature and help them develop, like, their drawing skills, parents can, they can be in touch with their kids then. They're not sort of just putting them in school and then at night there's nothing that brings them all together, or on the weekends. It'd be a great family outing.
Mm. Yeah, there's that for sure. You can start them out pretty young. I know there's a tracker wrote a book about counting toes on the animals, and I thought that was kind of cute because it's for a young kid that's just learning to read. And so here's this book that they have with the otter has 5 toes, and it was really cute. And I think that's a good way to start introducing them when they're young to integrate some of those other concepts that we do in education anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You do math, you do basic biology and health and things like that. You could all integrate all of that into tracking because it's all natural history. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, most education originally began with natural history.
Yeah.
And that's where some of the great scientists they went on expeditions to find new species and stuff like that. So they were exploring the world around them, and we've kind of gotten away from that more because now everybody has a phone with an app, and there's an app that will identify the plants and animals for you. Really? I think that's going a little too far because it takes away the human element of it. It takes away that learning of it, because you can point a phone at a leaf, and have the phone, come up with options of what the leaf is. That's great, but, it could become a problem because people won't be able to identify those things on their own. They'll rely on the apps to do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better to leave the phone in your campsite or something and go out and just try to identify things that you find on your own, because it's a much more fun. It engages your brain, and you're not just sitting there having some screen device do it for you.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Right.
Really advocate doing it that way.
Yeah, the experience is important. Don't just take a picture of something and destroy the experience, but go through it and experience it and live it.
Yeah.
It's kind of
and
like...
as a track,
go ahead.
I totally advocate taking pictures of tracks you find, because maybe you can't identify something in the field and you need to get help from someone else, other trackers to help
definitely.
you.
I do.
So I totally advocate taking pictures of tracks, and but don't let it become something like where you have a phone and your app is doing the work for you. I would recommend just leave that behind, or turn it off and leave it in your backpack or something, and just go out there and kind of enjoy the natural experience by itself, and just hang out there and kind of there's this concept, the Japanese concept of forest bathing, Shinrin Yoku, where you just go out there and you just experience it. And you can go sit under a tree, or you can go walk a path through a forest, or hang out by a lake or something, and it's all about the experience instead of relying on technology. I totally advocate for that. I think that's a great thing to do. Just go out there and just experience it. And they've actually documented scientifically that there are many health benefits through that, and it benefits your brain, because your brain gets more creative, and it creates more neural pathways and helps you solve problems better, and it makes you calmer, helps with people with depression. So it's really something to look into for sure.
And I think another aspect is probably, I don't know how much it's been studied yet, but people need to look in the neurology as well to see how we're more, that's the environment we evolved in. So when we're put back there, we're at home, and then we're going to be more relaxed and confident and at ease and everything. Whereas inside, it's good. I mean, I live in a house. I don't say get rid of them, but it's just not the same. Right. And I know every morning my brain does not get working and activated until I get outside. I mean, once I get out, it's the fresh air, and not just that, but just the practicality of it, the complexity of the environment. You look at the wall and like, oh, it's just this flat, boring thing. But, with the leaves, they're like so much texture and all these different leaves and different colors and sometimes some bugs in there. And looking in the distance, instead of just a wall, you got all this trees just going, step by step in the distance, and all these branches and leaves and sunshine. It just wakes you up,
Light, texture, pattern, things like that.
Yeah.
So basically, like art, like looking at it like an artist almost.
Yeah.
It smells too,
Yeah.
The complexity of it. Yeah. More structurally complex than a wall.
Yeah.
So your eyes are more entertained and more engaged in looking at nature than they are in looking at a wall.
And then, so that's one thing teachers need to do too in school, start getting more outdoor stuff, because of the effects it does have like that. Students going to learn a lot more about observation. Their brains are going to develop better if they do that instead of like looking at books and stuff. Because you look at, as we talked about in a previous episode, or one that'll come out whenever the order I put them out. But people take away recess and have the kids indoors all the time in elementary school and stuff. And we got to do better on standardized tests. More study. More reading. Well, how's that working out for us? It ain't.
Doesn't work out. Doesn't work very well.
No, it's like bad effects.
They need recess. You have to have that time to take a break and go outside and play.
Yeah.
Because your brain can't just sit there and try to study stuff within four walls all day long.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Drives me crazy.
Yeah.
But that's something they could do too. Like, that's another thing people can get going. Like, people live these different foundations, they donate money for things. Well, how about like trying to have some organizations that bring more woody areas, natural areas around schools and in subdivisions and in cities, have more wildlife corridors, have more gardens, so then the kids can get out and learn stuff more and interact with their environment instead of like being put in a cage. Like if you get a healthy lion and you put it in a 10 by 10 cage with a bunch of bars, is it going to stay healthy very long?
No.
Poor thing's going to suffer. So the same thing with the kids. You need to get like outdoors more to survive and thrive and really be healthy and really develop properly.
Yeah, and I wish that schools could take more field trips.
Yeah.
Find the time or the funding or holes in the schedule where you could schedule more field trips to actually go out to different places in nature and get the kids introduced to some of those concepts firsthand. Because, if you're in the city, you don't really have that opportunity. You don't have access to that. So you got to go somewhere. And in order to do that, the schools should be providing that, because I think it has to do with the education and the health of the overall of the child and helping them develop a healthy relationship with the world around them, and getting them outdoors and letting them experience that. Because it's one thing to live among the city and the four walls and the concrete all the time, but you got to get them away from that and show them that there is other places and other environments out there that they can learn about.
Yeah. And
field trips help to do that. And even if you do an overnight, like an overnight field trip would be awesome, but that, may not work for all schools. But what about just going to a park nearby your school, or even having a garden at your school?
Yeah.
Something that's outdoors that your kids could go out and grow some vegetables and then make a salad out of the vegetables or something, to get them involved like that with the outdoors.
Yeah, true.
Mm-hmm.
And then that could be developed really well. Like get them out doing things when they're really younger, and then learning some of the animal tracks, then develop things more and more as they go through school. So I think it'd be good to have biology instead of like one ignored, throw off class that they might take in high school. It should be, it's so important. It should be like every year in their education, or a semester through their whole entire education, or every other year or something like that. Learning about some basics and then getting broader and broader, because education's about learning how to think and reason and have thinking skills essentially. And so they could do that by learning some of the basic stuff. You know, they're doing individual animals or whatever when they're younger, and then they start to put the pieces together, and then when they're older, they're thinking, you know, got this bam, huge, broad, integrated perspective of ecology, you know?
Yeah, and that's something that should be taught alongside English and math. I mean, you have your CRs, but you really should be including ecology, basic ecology as well, because it's something that I think is going to become more important to have an understanding of, especially as the climate is changing, and we're going to be facing more ecological problems that are going to need to be solved by the coming generations. And if they're not getting that experience in school, then it's going to be much harder for them to catch up. There's only so much you can do in college. I mean, if you have a lifetime of study of ecology and wildlife and biology and, you know, all the related sciences, it helps you understand it better. Yeah. Kind of like in tracking, where you incorporate all those sciences. It gives you sort of an overview of how things work, of the ecology, of the interrelationships between the plants and the animals and their environment, and what the requirements are for each one of those species. And I think if we don't introduce that into education, then we're kind of robbing those kids of the opportunity, because they're going to need it with the changes that seem to be coming our way.
Yeah, and then it's important to get a interactive perspective and see there's cause-effect relationships instead of doing things in isolation, because people think, well, here now weed, here now my house, I spray pesticide, or insecticide, pesticide, and done. Well, no, it's got consequences. Does the pesticide go on that one single plant and stay on your property for like 3 seconds? No. The pesticide goes into the soil. It goes into the water. Do you want to drink that? How long does it take for it to break down? Where does it go? What else does it affect? If you don't have that, pesticide, but like herbicide, sorry. If you don't have that plant, then what insects do you not have? And therefore what, like, birds do you not have? Or like butterflies? And then you go spray insecticide everywhere. And why aren't there any butterflies? Well, you got herbicides and pesticides and insecticides everywhere. What do you expect?
Yeah. Or bees to pollinate our plants that we feed on, that we eat. Yeah.
So
and that whole concept of the bioaccumulation of those pesticides and insecticides is something that should be, you know, understood at a young age in the sciences. So waiting until high school or college to teach them that isn't helping. So because we've already seen how that's happening. It's killing the insects, killing the bees that pollinate things, and because we're over-relying on these insecticides and pesticides and rodenticides and everything else, because we don't really have that concept of what is this doing to the environment. If you kill the rodents, you poison them, well, a hawk is going to eat that rodent, or a bobcat's going to eat that poisoned rodent, and then that poison's going to kill the bobcat. And then if that dies, somebody's going to scavenge on it, and it's going to kill that animal.
And then
so that whole concept...
Go ahead.
It's a trickle-down thing. Like, you know, it accumulates up the food chain, and so that whole concept is a pretty broad concept, but it could be introduced in science. You know, even in elementary school science, you could start introducing that kind of concept so that students understand that this is how it happens in the real world. It doesn't, like you said, you spray that pesticide or insecticide, it doesn't just stay right there in your yard.
Yeah.
It'll make its way into the aquifer eventually. It'll be in our water. We'll be drinking it.
Yeah. I'd say like some of the integrated stuff should be a little later, but we agree on that point. Just maybe not when it's taught. I think it'd be better to like
when they have the concepts. Once they get those basic concepts down, then integrate them and show them how those things are related. Because
it's definitely important. We're both totally on board there, but like I think learning some animals and some plants. The basic idea would be kind of like learning some animals and some plants, starting to see a little bit how they're related.
Young with that.
Yeah, right. like okay, you got this plant and you got these plants here and these animals, and what eats this plant? And
this animal eats that plant.
And this animal eats what, and what eats it, and start to build up. And then as they get older and they're able to grasp broader and broader relationships, and they can start to bring in the ecology and start to see.
I think they start, with food webs.
Yeah.
Food webs or just that whole trophic cascade kind of idea.
Yeah, that's cool.
But showing them that. You can introduce food webs at a relatively young age because they've already got the point that the grasses are eaten by the animals.
Yeah.
And the animals are eaten by other animals. And once they get that, then you could introduce the whole food web concept and go from there.
And then they know from a really young age that too much water, plants die. Not enough sun, plants die. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Right.
So the whole thing would be like good to start getting in some of the basics in tracking in animals, start develop more and more about their relationships and their behavior, the whole lifespan of something. But that'd be a good thing to make a better educational system, make a better school, and do it over many years. Because
and also not ignoring the effects that humans have on the animals and their environment. Yeah. So incorporating that as we go.
Yeah, because we're part of the natural world. We're not separate from it. And
right. Yeah, we're part of it. We're living in it. We're living in their habitat, and we interact with the animals. So maybe some of those concepts could be introduced early also.
Yeah, and then that relates to the thing you were saying about how some stuff affects animals, but it doesn't just affect them. Because like herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, it's not like, well, it's an insecticide and I'm not an insect, so it doesn't affect me. It's an herbicide and I'm not an herb, so it doesn't affect me. Sorry, but
exactly.
We're animals, and the only way we can be healthy is the proper connections to our environment, to be integrated into it properly. The more we divorce ourselves from it, the more we are becoming anti-human, unhealthy. It's an anti-evolution. We've evolved.
Yeah,
we've evolved in a complex environment. So I think, one thing I'd like to see research on is how we're not possible unless there's a complex environment here in the first place.
That's true.
We didn't just come about in a vacuum or like some metal tube or something.
Yeah. Yeah, we need the environment. We need the plants and the animals. Without them, without the pollinators, nobody's here.
Yeah, because like
we need those basic things. We need the pollinators. We need the mycelium in the roots of the trees to give them the proper nutrition.
Right.
So they can process oxygen for us. And we need the plants
to eat. Yeah. So some people think, well, I'm human. I'll live, survive. Well, no. It's like if you want to be human and you care about your self-interest, well, for me, I cannot be my best and do all that unless there are certain animals and plants that are alive. And so if I want the best for myself and for those I care about, then I'd better be caring about those plants and animals. They need to be the healthiest they can be and be in a good environment, because I can't thrive unless they thrive. It's kind of like a married relationship. The husband and wife both got to get along if it's going to be a great relationship. It can't just be all one person.
If the plants and trees don't thrive and do well, then we don't have fresh oxygen, and because they make the oxygen when they process the carbon dioxide. So there's, without them, and then without them, what are we going to eat?
Yeah.
Because we eat the animals, we eat them, we eat the plants themselves. So the very basic thing, yeah, you're human and yeah, you might survive, but what's your quality going to be like, your quality of your life, if you don't have plants and animals?
Yeah. And then going into space is like a good experiment and laboratory for that, for people to see how it's important we're here. There's all kinds of health failures and problems that come up when people go to space.
Right, yeah, they have to figure out everything when you go to space, because you can't take anything with you other than yourself and your little suit that contains your environment.
Yeah. I forget the exact thing, but I'll have to put it in the show notes, but E.O. Wilson has a great quote about space travel. Because, people are so concerned with the physics and all that stuff, and not enough are really, or if many people, if any, but they're not concerned about the biology and whether it's biologically possible and what we need to do. So he says, the idea of human space travel, or like going to Mars, is somewhere in a triangle of stupidity, insanity, and ignorance. It's perfect.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But cool. So there's some good ideas, as you say there, for like teachers, school administrators, people can bring to school boards, hopefully. Get in some tracking, drawing skills, get into different classes, try to get this hierarchical development from simple things we see to the more abstract. Yeah. If we think about how we build knowledge, that help, and then we can do that individually. I know it's helped me, as I've talked about before. I've learned, have a degree in math, learn physics, learn chemistry, have a degree in philosophy. Philosophy is a science too, but I didn't really feel like I was learning science until I started tracking and foraging. Yeah. Because then I'm learning from other people, I'm reading lots of books, but this is like all me. I mean, I'm out there doing it. It's my own independent experience,
Yeah, and that's the great thing about tracking, is it is your independent experience, because nobody can really teach you tracking. You have to learn it yourself. You can't just, you're not going to haul that other person along with you and go, hey, what's this track? What's this track? They have a life too. So you have to learn it yourself so you can identify the tracks on your own. So tracking kind of forces you to learn it in a way. If you're into tracking, like most of us that are interested in this, we get kind of obsessed with it. And
it's great.
To the point of, we buy every book about tracking, and we join all the online groups about tracking. We talk to other trackers, and we're into it. This is the thing. We're totally obsessed with it, and and you can't get to that level of interest in something and not learn.
Yeah.
The learning comes naturally when you're immersed in that kind of environment. And that's the thing with tracking, is it is such a fascinating skill and a thing that attracts a lot of attention. Like, kids really like tracking. They want to do it. And because it generates that much fascination, it could be a window into learning all these other things.
Yeah, true.
I think that's sort of the natural progression of tracking. If you really get into it, you're going to want to learn more and more and more, and it's just going to feed on itself. You're just going to be like this little vacuum wanting to suck up all the knowledge that you can about tracking.
Are you talking about me? What? Oh, you're talking about the podcast in general.
That's every tracker I've ever known. That's all. That's all of us. That's sort of the evolution of a tracker. Is you start out going, oh, look at this track. This is a squirrel track, and why is it not a raccoon track? And then you just dive in with both feet, and you're hooked. That's it. Yeah. You're done.
How
you never turn off. There is no off switch on tracking. It's just,
good, yeah.
You just want to learn more and more. And even after decades of learning it, there's still more stuff to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You never run out.
Yeah, and as you're saying, it teaches some good skills of like independent thought and community as well. Just like the fact that
and research skills.
We're fission and fusion animals, and so there's that independent aspect and that social aspect in it. Pardon, go ahead.
Right. Oh yeah, and you're learning the social aspects, and you're learning research skills. So you're learning where to look up different information.
Oh yeah.
And you're learning how to communicate what you're seeing in the track. So you are observing the track closely, or the tracker sign, and you're making close observations in nature, and then you're communicating them to somebody else, which also, hardwires your brain to see that stuff. So you're making those little neural pathways in your brain where you can recognize it in the future.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
It's sort of you start with a set of tracks, and then you go, oh, this animal went through here, and it went up this tree, and here's a nest, or this animal went down a burrow, or here's a scat. And all those things begin to fascinate you to the point where you have to know what they are.
Yeah.
That's what tracking is. You're just like this endless search for knowledge.
True.
And to increase your own knowledge of what you're seeing out there.
That's a good way to put it.
That's what's so cool about it.
Yeah, it's an endless search for knowledge and what's going on out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kim, when animals kind of crisscross or follow each other, does it make it pretty tough to tell kind of which animals or what they were doing at the time? Do you see that much, or do the animals?
I think more. It depends on the substrate. If you have snow or nice damp sand or something, you can see that kind of thing happening, or mud near a river. But you'd have to have long expanses of really good substrate to come up with those kind of stories. Mm-hmm. And you can see animal interactions happening. Mm-hmm. One time down on the Sacramento River, I found where a mink had chased a squirrel and a ground squirrel out, and caught it and dragged it off into the brush. And so that kind of thing, you can find those kind of interactions and interpret them, and that's also part of the fascination, is interpreting the stories that are happening out there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So those animals, they're hunting each other all the time, and you can find drag marks where there's fur. One time I found a bobcat kill where it caught a jackrabbit and then dragged it off into the brush, and there was clumps of fur caught here and there, and I was able to follow it to find where the bobcat had stashed the carcass.
Oh, wow.
So, you can follow those interactions. You can find those things out there. And that's part of the fun, too, is interpreting the story behind the track.
And then on Animals Don't Cover Their Tracks, sometimes there's some good photos of some holes in the snow, and all of a sudden there's wings and no more holes. In the wintertime, you get a lot more of those pictures. Like the squirrel tracks are really a common one. What is this? Because it's everywhere. Like those tracks, they just go in straight lines between things, and it's kind of an interesting track, and it looks almost, if you kind of squint your eyes or something, it looks like it could be four toes of somebody's foot, and so it's often misinterpreted as just a foot when it actually is all 4 feet because the animal's small. So that happens a lot, and those are pretty fascinating tracks, and so in the wintertime you get a lot of pictures of those sent to the group, and what are these kind of questions. Cool. So that's also another window, like, if people are curious enough about the tracks, is to interest them in further knowledge of tracking is, hey, you could learn this. This is fun. Or take your kids out and go find these tracks and see if you can identify them.
That's right.
Yeah, and then one thing they got in different areas, like everywhere pretty much, you got like crickets and grasshoppers and ants, and so in some places, or if you want, put out some sand somewhere. But I think it's fascinating looking at the tracks of insects too, because they're all over. So it's not like you have to be in the country, because you got, is it a fire ant? Is it a cow killer? Is it a grasshopper? Was it a cricket? Was it one of them kissing bugs?
Spiders.
Pardon?
Yeah. Spiders, lizards, and lizards, snakes, and frogs. Those tend to fascinate kids too. The reptiles and amphibians are just these really cool critters that have this really neat life cycle and so much to learn about them. And those also leave tracks out there, and those are pretty fun to find.
Mm-hmm.
You could set up a tracking box like that, like you said, just putting out sand or getting some of that powdered clay stuff, the really fine stuff, and putting it in a box, a shallow box. You could stick some bait in the middle and see who comes to get it. So that's another way you could introduce tracking to your kids in your backyard is, put out a little tracking box.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe birds land in it.
Yeah, birds land there. Maybe a squirrel visits, or you could get rabbits. Any number of things could walk across it.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of a cool way to introduce your kids to tracking.
And so briefly, or Melanie, did you have a question before I ask one?
Oh, I was going to ask him if she gets snow where she's at, or if she ever actively goes and, seeks out a snowy location so she can kind of track in a little different way. I just wonder, because we have snow here half the year.
Oh, you guys are lucky. You get snow. We get a lot of rain, 60 to 80 inches of rain, and very rarely will we get snow, but sometimes we do, and it'll stick to the ground for a day, maybe two, and it's usually only like an inch or two of snow, so it doesn't stick long.
Okay.
But so that's really fun to.
Yeah.
When we do. Yeah, it's kind of a treat.
So
to go out. Yeah.
And for some folks that are new, could you maybe, let's say, tell the difference? And last time we talked about in detail about cat and dog. What are some highlights of differentiating, maybe squirrel versus raccoon versus opossum versus armadillo versus what else can we throw in there? I guess we'll just go with those right now. Squirrel, raccoon, opossum, armadillo.
Yeah, squirrel versus raccoon gets confused a lot.
Huh.
Because there's 5 toes, and the field guides show the picture with 5 toes, a lot of times squirrel and raccoon gets confused. And I think that's mostly because the field guides aren't showing the size right alongside the track.
Whereas Kim's website does. By the way, look at Kim's website. It's really good. I'll put a link in the show notes. Go ahead.
Okay. bear-tracker.com. So squirrels have four toes on their front feet as opposed to 5. There is a 5th toe, but it's so super small you have to look really close to see it. So mostly on the front feet of squirrels you see 4 toes, and on the hind feet you see 5. Now on squirrels' hind feet, the middle 3 toes are usually grouped together, and the toes are almost equal in length, so that the tips of the toes, if you draw a line across them, they're almost in a line, in a row, and the 2 outer toes stick out to the sides. So that's a much different arrangement than in a raccoon, where there's a sort of a C-shaped palm pad in a raccoon, and long toes that are relatively thick that are connected to that palm pad, kind of cigar-shaped because they're bulbous at the end. They're fatter at the ends than they are at the narrow end towards the palm. And sometimes you see their claws and sometimes you don't. And that's true for both species, the squirrels and the raccoons. And also the size-wise, the raccoons are usually a couple inches. I mean, they're not really tiny. An inch for a squirrel is pretty good size. Your gray squirrels get a little bit bigger because they're a larger animal. But like a red squirrel or something small like that, an inch is a good size for a track. But
they can be
larger than that would be the raccoon. Yeah, raccoon 2 inches or more. I mean, if you have a whole heel showing on a raccoon, it can be more than 4 inches long if the hind track shows the entire heel.
Is the hind bigger than the front in the raccoon?
Yeah, if the entire heel imprints, the hind's bigger than the front. And that's the other thing with squirrels, raccoons. A lot of animals that have that heel longer in the back don't always put that all the way down on the ground. Sometimes if they're moving slowly or if they pause to sit for a moment and observe, you'll see the whole heel. But it's not the usual thing. They usually walk kind of on their toes. Mm-hmm. Just like a cat or a dog, if they sit back, they'll imprint the entire heel. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, they're walking up on their toes.
Yeah.
You don't see it. What was the other species?
Possum.
The squirrel, possum. Oh, possum. Okay. Possums are really cool because they have on their hind foot, they have this opposable thumb. And the thumb is really big. It sticks out to the side, pointing inwards on the trail, like towards the center line of the body. And they have 5 toes on the hind foot and 5 toes on the front foot. The front foot, they're in an arc, and the toes are kind of arranged. It looks almost like a little sunrise. The whole arrangement of those toes, because they usually splay out, and so their toes are all pointing in different directions. When they walk, usually the hind foot and the front foot somewhat overlap a little bit, so it just looks like this big jumble of toes. Some trackers refer to it as a star pattern, sort of like a starburst. And I kind of like the sunrise analogy, because the front foot kind of looks like a sunrise just peeking above the landscape, or above the horizon. And the hind foot, the other toes, the other 4 other than the thumb, they face the other direction, more like at a, I don't know, like a 90-degree angle from the thumb approximately. It varies, but the 3 in the center are usually close together, and the pinky finger is sometimes together with those and sometimes sticks out by itself. But the 3 in the middle tend to stick together very closely in the track, unless it's really super splayed in mud. They're also about the same size as a raccoon track. So you can confuse opossum and raccoon really easily.
How do you differentiate?
Well, look for that opposable thumb for sure. That's going to help you. And the narrowness of the toes. On the hind foot of the opossum, they seem to be narrower than you'll see on a raccoon. The opossum's front foot could be easily confused with a raccoon, but the palm pad itself is separated into parts, into lobes, and it's not as long as that of the raccoon. The raccoon is more a single flat surface, and it's larger than the area that you have on the opossum.
Cool. What about armadillo?
Armadillos have weird feet.
Yeah.
They're just a weird animal. So even though their toes are, they have 5 toes, they don't show the entire foot. So if you're an armadillo, the way they walk, the 3 middle toes will imprint a lot, and then the outer 2 little toes don't always show up. And then the other foot has 2, and they don't always show up. 2 is what shows up instead of 4. So it's kind of weird. When you're looking at them, they look almost like a little deer track, because they have just 2 toes that prominently show up. But they actually have 4. So in some substrates, it's better than others. So the front tracks, you'll see those 2 toes, but one of them will be longer than the other, and there's usually a little claw mark, which you have to look kind of closely for. And then, so when you see the hind track, you usually just see 3 toes. But if you look further back, you can sometimes see tiny imprints from the 2 hind toes, which are toes 1 and 5. You number them based on starting in the center line of the body going outward, and you number them 1 to 5. So toes number 1 and 5 on the front foot are super tiny, and they don't always leave an imprint. Toes 2, 3, and 4 are really prominent. They usually leave an imprint, and they're just 3 toes in a kind of a bird-like arrangement. So if you've seen like raven tracks or other bird tracks that have 3 toes facing forward and 1 facing backwards, that's similar to the arrangement in the armadillo track, where you have those 3 pointing forward. And it can look kind of funny if you don't see the outer toes. It looks just like a bird track without, the helix, which is the backward facing toe. So the front foot has those 4 toes, and toes number 2 and 5 are the ones that don't show up very often. The other ones do show up, but they look relatively deer-like, but they're small.
And then
so they have strange feet.
But then
they're kind of like one of the weirdest animals.
but then the toes of the armadillo make a wider print than a bird would.
Yeah, they make, and they don't show a helix. So like on a bird, if you have 3 toes facing forward, oftentimes there will be a 4th toe that faces backwards, and that's called the helix. You won't see that on the armadillo because it doesn't have that. So look for that. If it's there, it's a bird. If it's not, armadillo. Look for also claw marks in the front. So you'll see the claw marks are usually a little bit deeper towards the toe end of it. And also their toes are thicker. So most birds aren't going to have really thick, wide toes. Yeah. Unless you're like an eagle or a raven or something. But armadillos have those, they have thicker toes. So look for that. And then also, if you have mud or if you can follow it to some good substrate, look for those tiny outer toes, which sometimes imprint and sometimes they don't. So look for those toe number 1 and 5 on that track.
And sometimes when I'm out, I can't see much from an armadillo print except 2 holes in the ground. It looks like someone just punched 2 holes. They had like some pencils and they punched 2 holes and went and punched 2 holes.
Oh, geez. Just the claw marks, huh? That's a lot of times what you see with rabbit tracks, too, is that in certain substrates, you just see the toes, not the toes, but the claws. You just see the little imprints from the claws. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in skunks, if the skunk is walking on a relatively hard substrate, all that will leave an imprint is just the claw mark. So you'll see like this arc of 5 claws. And between skunks and rabbits, that can get a little interesting because they're close in size, and if you're just going by the imprints of the claw marks, it can be kind of difficult to interpret those. So those are another one that's kind of hard. But I don't think you would, you may confuse an armadillo for a raccoon, but probably not because of the thickness of the toes. Yeah. I think the thickness of the toes and also the lack of the palm pad in the armadillo would help tell between raccoons. It's more easy to confuse a raccoon for an opossum than an armadillo and a raccoon.
Yeah, pretty distinct. Armadillo very different. And squirrels are more like the toes are like little dots instead of like little cigar.
Yeah, they're not like a cigar. They have an actual toe pad at the end of theirs that shows up a lot better. And in the raccoon, usually you'll see the whole toe. You'll see the whole length of the toe connected to the palm pad. And in squirrels, in good substrate, you'll see that. But if it's not really good substrate, you might just see the toes, and then you'll see the palm pad behind it with a separation. But if you're in mud, you can often see the entire imprint of the toe, the bone structure of the toe.
Cool. All right. Looks like Melanie's got to take her kids to karate, so unfortunately we got to stop. But cool. Okay. That was good. Good discussion. I'm glad we got to get into some details about some different tracks for some people out there and talk about what tracking is. That was interesting, what you had to say. Really interesting. And then,
tracking's fun. Tracking is just endless educational opportunities.
And then, do you have any last words, Kim?
Get out there and look at tracks and sign and see what you can find. And if nothing else, just go outside and do Shinrin Yoku. Do the forest bathing. Just go outside and enjoy it.
Cool. Awesome.
I recommend it.
So we got a lot more to discuss. So hopefully we can have another conversation about this in the future, or 2 or 3.
All right.
But cool.
Sounds good.
So, anything, Melanie? Any last words?
Thanks so much, Kim. It's usually just overwhelming for me because you guys both know so much about this. It's really educational for me. So I really appreciate you guys talking about all this.
Motivating.
Thanks for inviting me.
And I hope the passion comes through. Sometimes when I'm talking, I'm just being passionate about some stuff, but I hope some people don't think I'm being accusatory towards them, because I know it's different folks in the audience, and some will be right on cheering, yeah, I agree with you, and some might think I'm criticizing them, but it's maybe criticizing in a proper sense of the word, in a good way. It's hey, let's do this, but
right.
So it was good to really today get into some ways teachers can use this and parents in the classroom and at home and all that. I was I'm glad we could discuss that, Kim. Thank you.
Yeah, enthusiasm and passion.
Yeah, that's tracking.
Yeah. Exactly, that's it right there.
So cool.
And obsession.
So thank you again very much, Kim. And people, if you could share the podcast with friends, parents, if you know people who are parents, teachers, school administrators, people involved in education, adults that are interested in stuff. It's like someone who's curious and inquiring and wants to learn more and do more and make their life better, make society better. Please share it. Please donate to the show if you could. Give us some 5-star reviews and some rational reviews about the show, please. And hope you enjoyed it. And we will be back with Kim because we loved talking with her.
Yep. Thanks so much again, Kim.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thank you. Y'all have a good one. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Happy tracking. Thanks.
Yeah.